Imagine a perfect world. Gold flows like water across borders. Kings write letters across vast oceans. Peace treaties last for many generations. Cities glow under the Mediterranean sun. It is the year 1200 BCE. Humanity has reached an incredible peak. The Bronze Age is a golden era. Then, it all just stops. Every major global superpower vanishes overnight. Grand palaces burn to the ground. Writing itself is completely forgotten. Silence reigns for 400 years. What killed the ancient world? To truly grasp the sheer terror of this ancient murder mystery, you must first understand the victim. The Late Bronze Age was not a primitive, isolated time. It was a thriving, glittering web of global superpowers. The Egyptians, the Hittites in the north, the Mycenaeans in the west, the Babylonians and Assyrians in the east. These empires were deeply, beautifully connected. Kings called each other brother in their diplomatic letters. They traded exotic goods, ivory, gold, lapis lazuli, across thousands of miles of unforgiving terrain. It was a beautifully synchronized, cosmopolitan world order. It was the first true globalization. But around the year 1177 BCE, as historian Eric Klein meticulously pieced together, the heartbeat of this magnificent world simply flatlined. In the span of a single human lifetime, sprawling metropolises were reduced to smoking craters. The mighty Hittite Empire, whose iron-fisted rule spanned across the vast expanse of modern-day Turkey, was wiped from the face of the earth. Their capital, Hattusa, was burned so intensely that the mud bricks fused into solid glass. In Greece, the heavily fortified Mycenaean citadels were abruptly abandoned, left to the ghosts and the wind. Down in the Levant, the bustling, wealthy trade hub of Ugarit met a sudden, violent end. We actually possess the final, desperate message sent by the ruler of Ugarit to a neighboring king. It was baked into a hardened clay tablet by the sheer, devastating heat of the fires that ultimately destroyed his city. It reads like a transmission from a sinking ship. Enemy ships are here. They have burned my towns. The country is ruined. Does my father not know that all my troops and chariots are in the Hittite country, and all my ships are in the land of Lyncia? Thus, the country is abandoned to itself. Who were these nameless enemies? Who could possibly possess the overwhelming power to shatter the greatest, most heavily defended empires on Earth? For decades, early historians pointed their trembling fingers at a terrifying phantom menace known collectively as the Sea Peoples. Ancient Egyptian carvings on temple walls depict them as a relentless, unstoppable horde attacking from the dark ocean. They wore strange horned helmets and feathered headdresses. They carried brutal, slashing swords. They left no homeland behind, no written records to study, and absolutely no mercy for the conquered. They were the ultimate bogeymen of the Bronze Age. But pull out the magnifying glass. Look a little closer at the dusty corners of those ancient Egyptian stone reliefs. The Sea Peoples did not just bring warships, they brought heavy, lumbering wooden carts. Inside those carts were women, young children, and meager herds of livestock. This was not a highly trained invading military force bent on global domination. This was a desperate, starving, apocalyptic migration. So, what terrifying force were they running from? And how could an ocean of frightened refugees possibly topple a hyper-advanced global superpower? Can a ragtag fleet of desperate wanderers really break the back of a globally fortified world order? No, the Sea Peoples did not murder the Bronze Age. They were merely the vultures circling a beast that was already dying. The truth hidden deep in the ancient dirt is far more eerie. Let us look at the ancient world through the lens of a modern system. Think of the Bronze Age as an incredibly complex, sky-high house of cards. Or even better, imagine it like our modern internet. To make bronze, the absolute lifeblood of their military technology, agriculture, and daily survival, you needed two distinct things. You needed copper, which mostly came from the island of Cyprus, and you needed tin. Tin was the vital microchip of the ancient world. It was incredibly rare. To get it, caravans had to travel all the way from distant, treacherous mines in places like modern-day Afghanistan. If the tin stops flowing, the bronze stops being made. If the bronze stops, the tools break, the weapons shatter. The entire agricultural economy grinds to a halt. It was a fragile, perfectly balanced supply chain stretching across continents. If one server in this ancient network went down, the entire global system would inevitably glitch. What happens when the supply chain of reality simply unplugs overnight? Chaos. Absolute, uncontrollable, starving chaos. And right around 1200 BCE, nature itself decided to pull the plug. Modern science has given us an incredible, almost magical window into the deep past. We do not need a fictional time machine. We just need fossilized pollen grains and ancient ice cores. Researchers analyzing deep sediment layers from the bottom of the Sea of Galilee and coastal lagoons in Cyprus found something deeply unsettling. The pollen from lush oak and towering pine trees suddenly vanished from the geological record. In its place, they found only the dusty remains of hardy desert weeds. A colossal, localized mega-drought had settled over the entire Mediterranean. The rains just stopped. Not for a bad season, not for a difficult year. The sky dried up for 3 solid centuries. Mighty rivers shrank to muddy, putrid trickles. The vital wheat withered and died in the fields. The golden harvests that reliably fed millions of people suddenly turned to blowing dust. Famine is a slow, silent killer, but it drives the human mind to unimaginable madness. When the massive state granaries emptied out, the kings entirely lost their power to rule. The gods themselves seemed to have abandoned humanity. But the earth was not done punishing them. Geological records reveal an eerie, catastrophic phenomenon known as an earthquake storm. Over a brutal 50-year period, a relentless sequence of massive tectonic ruptures tore through the Mediterranean fault lines. Cities were literally shaken to pieces over and over again before they could even rebuild. Grand stone palaces collapsed directly on top of sleeping queens and royal guards. So you have a perfect, devastating storm. The ground is literally shaking apart beneath their feet. The sky stubbornly refuses to rain. The crops are completely dead. And then the heavy dominoes begin to fall. The mighty Hittite Empire is starving to death. They send panicked, desperate letters to Egypt, begging for emergency grain shipments to keep their people alive. But Egypt is struggling with its own failing harvests and internal panic. Without enough food, rampant disease quickly ravages the weak and terrified populations. When people are truly hungry, they immediately stop caring about the laws of men. They stop caring about the divine rights of kings. Internal rebellions erupt like wildfire in the dry brush. The peasant class, desperate for a single crumb of bread, turn viciously on their own rulers. The magnificent palaces were highly likely burned not by foreign invaders, but by their own starving, furious citizens. This was the dark engine that drove the sea peoples into the unforgiving ocean. They were ordinary victims of a dying climate, running blindly into the dark, smashing into whatever coastal cities still possessed a glimmer of hoarded food. It was a violent, chaotic scramble for the absolute last scraps of a decaying world. When the invisible threads of society snap, how quickly does a civilized neighbor turn into a desperate monster? Within a few brutal decades, the shining light of human civilization was simply extinguished. The aftermath is the most profoundly chilling part of this entire mystery. We casually call it the Bronze Age collapse, but that phrase is far too clinical. It was an absolute apocalypse. When the grand palaces finally fell, they took the collective memory of humanity down into the ashes with them. The intricate, beautiful writing systems used by the royal scribes vanished entirely. In Greece, the very ability to read and write was entirely forgotten. Think about the gravity of that. For 400 long, dark years, nobody wrote down a single word. An entire advanced culture was violently plunged into a silent, generational amnesia. The traumatized survivors forgot how to build with massive quarried stones. They huddled together in small, terrified mud brick villages, built directly on top of the shattered ruins of their grandfathers' magnificent empires. Hundreds of years later, when classical Greeks like Homer looked up at the massive, towering stone walls of Mycenae, they literally could not believe human beings had built them. They thought giant mythical creatures called Cyclops must have magically stacked the massive stones. They had completely forgotten the greatness of their own bloodline. We love to think of history as a grand, infinite staircase. We falsely assume that every single year we inevitably step upward. We invent shiny new things, we build taller glass towers, we cure more complex diseases. We incorrectly assume that progress is an undeniable, unshakable law of physics. We believe deep down that tomorrow will always be infinitely more advanced than today. But the blowing dust of the Bronze Age whispers a much darker, much older truth. Progress is a fragile illusion. Civilization is completely, terrifyingly reversible. It is highly possible to fall all the way down the stairs. It is possible for humanity to collectively forget everything it knows and stumble blindly back into the terrifying shadows of the cave. Look closely around you right now. Look at the glowing screen of your phone. Look at the power lines humming quietly outside your window in the dark. Look at the food in your kitchen, grown on a completely different continent, shipped across deep oceans on massive steel vessels, fueled by buried oil. We currently live in the most hyper-connected, delicate web of supply and demand the planet has ever seen in its history. If our global network of fiber optic cables and cargo ships paralyzed tomorrow, how long would it take for our own grand cities to burn? We are absolutely not immune to the invisible forces that erased the ancient world. A wildly changing climate, failing critical crops, crumbling infrastructure, and mass, desperate migrations. The ghosts of the year 1177 BCE are not just dry, irrelevant bones sitting in a quiet museum. They are a loud, echoing warning. They are a dark mirror held up to our own faces. We are building our shiny technological towers higher and higher into the sky, but the hidden foundation is made of the exact same fragile dust. History is not a straight line ascending into the light. It is a terrifying, delicate balancing act suspended directly over a bottomless drop.